So we're talking with Diane Marger Moore, and the purpose of this discussion is to help victims of the campfire. But before we go into the details of insurance, I'd like to know a little bit about you. So what law firm do you represent?
I'm an attorney with Baum, Hedlund, Aristi, and Goldman. We're a Los Angeles-based firm, but we also have offices in the District of Columbia and in Philadelphia.
And your background is in the South, the East Coast. You've done work in Florida and Georgia. What brought you to Los Angeles?
I also did a lot of work in Indiana.
Right.
One of the lawyers here had worked on a case with me and worked with me a while and strongly recommended me to the firm, and they were kind enough to give me an opportunity 8 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
And was that culture shock moving to Los Angeles from the East Coast?
I don't live in Los Angeles. I work here, but I live in Florida.
Aha. So how often do you come to LA?
I'd say at least 4 or 5 times a year when we're preparing. For example, since the fires, I've been here probably 2 months, off and on. I fly a great deal. I handle a lot of our cases. They're on the East Coast, so I'm always on airplanes.
Aha. I found that's a good place to get a lot of work done. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely, unless I'm in the very back of the airplane where mainly I'm eating my knees.
Oh my goodness, they should send you business. What led you to be an attorney?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I've been a lawyer now for 41 years. When I was a lawyer, I was one of 3 women in my class. And my dad was a lawyer, so I'd probably have to say my dad was a wonderful character, loved being a trial lawyer, and I probably did it because of him.
And now there's more women in law school, but there still aren't very many women in partners in firms who have, the prestige and the money and the power. Are you seeing changes, or what do you think inhibits women rising to the top of law firms?
I think part of it is ourselves. We fail to make the demand, the insistence to reach those levels. Women have just in the past 10 years started their own firms so that they can create those levels and that level of competence. I started my own firm in 1980 when judges still asked me if I was allowed to speak in their courtroom. So I think it has a great deal to do with our own willingness to advocate for ourselves. And candidly, we've been set back dramatically in the last 2 years. Places I thought we'd already gone through years ago. Now we're getting some of that pushback from males again. And we as women have to stand up for ourselves. And for our clients, most importantly, our clients.
Sheryl Sandberg got a lot of flack in a way for her books on lean in and telling women you just have to be more assertive, you just have to get out there. And people said, no, it's a patriarchal system. There's prejudice, there's discrimination. It isn't enough to just say, I'm here, pay attention to me, I'm waving my hand.
I don't know if that's true. My first trial was in Reedsville, Georgia in 1979, and it was a death penalty defense case. And the judge had never seen a female lawyer. I would say that he was at the beginning, he said, what's a nice little girl like you doing in my courtroom? Are you sure you want to do this kind of case? But by the end of the trial, I believe I had earned his respect. And I don't think it's mere aggressiveness. On the contrary, sometimes it's a matter of just showing your willingness to work, your abilities. And I think that I actually had a judge, a district judge in South Carolina, told me that some briefing that I did changed his mind about issues of local counsel. And I think that's what's happened over the years. There may be lawyers that sure don't like me, but hopefully they respect my ability and the fact that I really care about my clients and what I'm doing. So yeah, I think we have to do that, and there are a number of books written on it. But to believe that it's only through aggressiveness, I don't think that's true. I think it's through self-confidence. It's a willingness to take those tough cases and to move them forward.
You said somewhere that a good litigator is a great storyteller of the client's story. So I'm assuming that you've learned to be a good storyteller.
I hope so. I started as a child telling stories to my parents about where I had been that evening. No, I think that it takes a willingness to first get to know the client's story. Many lawyers don't take the time. They look at the facts as it's, legal, from a legal perspective. But knowing the clients, what's happening. The last couple of days we've been going out to people whose homes are burned, seeing the property, talking to them about how long they'd lived there. So I do think it takes a great storyteller because it's about human beings, not just about dollars and cents. And convincing a jury of that is important.
Right. The two books that you've written have been about little children who were apparently killed by their mothers. What led you to write about that? I mean, it seems like it would be so sad.
Well, actually, for a period of my life, I was a chief deputy arson prosecutor in Indianapolis. I had moved there because my husband is a Hoosier. Prosecuting those cases, when I went to prosecute the first one, and he was a father who was accused of killing his 8-week-old child, everyone, including the Attorney General of Indiana, said that you could not win that kind of case. It couldn't be won. And so I took on the case because sometimes justice requires you just taking on what other people say is impossible. And I chose to write about them because, people know about the cases that the media thinks are exciting or exotic, rather than what everyday prosecutors do and what women do frequently. I also wrote because there aren't that many women prosecutors who have won their cases, especially hard cases, that tell their stories. So one of the cases, Shark Eyes, is about a fire dispatcher who killed his son. And the second one, Inconvenience Gone, is about a mother who we allege killed her son, although we never found the body. And that woman, what caused me really to write it, is that woman spent some time in prison and then got accepted by Harvard for a PhD program on a full scholarship after she served less than half her sentence. Harvard then decided not to accept her. She's at NYU on a full scholarship, but she never wanted to talk about the fact that she'd never disclosed where the body of this beautiful little boy was, and that his mother and grandmother have never been able to bury him. So I just thought it was important to tell their stories, really. And it's fun to write books.
Mm-hmm. So are you convinced that the mother did kill her son?
I never would have prosecuted a case that I didn't believe in.
Mm.
I had that luxury when I was a prosecutor. I had already been a lawyer for many years. I'd always wanted to prosecute. And when the elected prosecutor in Indianapolis gave me that opportunity, I told him I could never do a case that I didn't believe in. And he accepted that. So in both cases, at least I was convinced, and I hoped to convince a jury that that's what they'd done. So the jury is the one that had to be convinced.
Mm-hmm. And she went to prison.
She did.
Yeah. So you convinced the jury. Do you have another book that you're thinking about?
Actually, I do. It's, once you start writing, it's a beautiful outlet. And I probably work 50 to 60 hours a week as a lawyer, and then my relaxation is writing at night. So, my husband kicks me every now and then for that, but I'm writing another book about another case I prosecuted. And somewhere in the future, I'd like to write a nonfiction book, but a fiction book, but nonfiction is so much stranger than fiction, in my opinion.
And you have 2 children as well to balance in all of this.
I have the greatest kids. Fortunately, they've both got their master's degree, and I've kicked them out of the house. So, yes, we're past that, but they're wonderful.
So, could you give us a kind of an overview of the damage done by the Camp Fire? Do you have in your mind how many homes were destroyed, how many people were injured or killed? Can you give us a kind of overview of the damage from that fire?
I do. I didn't look at it, and I apologize. So many homes were damaged. Bobby Kennedy Jr., who's working on the case with us, and I were able to go to Paradise the first day they reopened it for homeowners. And it truly looks like what one would imagine if an atom bomb had exploded. There are literally no houses. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it, like a mirage, you'll see one house that's standing and totally undamaged. We know that approximately 86 people died. We know that hundreds, if not thousands, of houses were destroyed or damaged. We know that infrastructure, the things you fail to think about, the water lines, the electric, every cable, everything was destroyed, and buildings that one never even realized could be destroyed. I mean, we're not just talking about stick-built buildings. We're talking about brick, and you'll go through an entire neighborhood and only the chimney is left standing. It is astounding. And the scope of it is dramatic.
PG&E, I read, has accepted responsibility for, there was some power line problem in Polga that started the whole thing. Is that your understanding, that they have accepted it but declared bankruptcy?
They have never, in a way that would be admissible at a trial, accepted responsibility. Because PG&E was already under court control because of criminal activities. I mean, Judge Alsop, a federal judge, was supervising PG&E, and as a result of that supervision, he demanded that they explain what had happened and why it had happened. And in fact, that's when the photographs came out of that particular area, and they attributed it to certain defects at that point. However, almost at the same time, they started telling media outlets that there were people that had been shooting at the power line and that maybe that was cause of it. I'm not sure if you read that. I saw that as an equivocation by them. You know, they talked about the fact that there was evidence of local people who were taking shots. And so I believe that it is clear from all of the experts, and we've not yet got the final CAL FIRE report, but I believe the conclusion will be that PG&E is solely responsible for the fire, for failing to properly maintain very old systems, lines, conductors, all of the parts that are necessary, and inspect them properly. So it's hard to tell whether it was the age of the components or their failure to inspect. When PG&E was asked how and if they inspected, they said they did overflight inspections. So someone flew around in a helicopter or an airplane to inspect power line. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept, but that was their response. So I don't believe that who caused the fire or why will be a major issue in the case. I think that PG&E will be found responsible for it, certainly. But as plaintiffs in the lawsuit, we always have to prepare to be ready with that proof. And that's why we've hired fire cause and origin experts, one who was with ATF for 25 years and part of their national response team, and also an electrical, he actually is not an electrical engineer, he's an electrical technology engineer, but he has worked for more than 20 years in determining the source of fires.
Mm-hmm. You know, people who live on the ridge in Paradise, I've heard some of them tell me wild stories of they think the fire was started through the smart meters, and there were like these volts of destructive energy that hit house by house. Have you heard those kind of conspiracy theories of the fire?
Absolutely. I mean, there are whole bunches of theories, and part of it is that unlike the folks with the Malibu fire who are getting some real assistance really quickly, Paradise, I mean, PG&E hired lawyers from all over the country, including a herd of them from New York and Philadelphia. They have them from all over, and pulled into bankruptcy. So there's a bankruptcy stay and we can't get information. Those folks, I mean, some of them still have not been allowed onto their properties. They were allowed on and then they were kicked back out. We know that there are both flammable and hazardous materials as a result of the burning. So there are health risks that are not being addressed. It's a horror. It's a horror. And so I think as a result of that, conspiracy theories come up pretty regularly, because why are they being deprived of that kind of access? And as lawyers, it is incredibly frustrating for us, because the federal court, when the federal court enters a stay, it means we are unable as lawyers, even though we sued early on, before the bankruptcy filing, we are unable to obtain discovery or other information concerning PG&E's involvement to try and help our clients. So we've been trying to help with FEMA. Some people have opined that the current administration at the federal level has undermined the federal process in California. I'm not going to comment on that. But we know what kind of relief Texas gets as compared to California. So there are concerns with that, but FEMA has expanded their plans. One of the things that we've tried to do is to those folks in Paradise that were insured, give them a hand, help them with their insurance and not take a part of it. Unfortunately, some of these people, public adjusters rushed in and want 15 or 20% of what they get for folks when folks are underinsured as it is. It's, I don't know, it's not America. It's not good what's happening there. But we're trying to do everything we can to help. And it's limited, and that's frustrating.
Did you hear that Trump didn't even get the name right? He called it pleasure.
Boy, that brings up a lot of thoughts to mind that, once again, I was told to behave, so I'm not going to say, but yeah. Yeah, let's not go on to Trump, because that's going to be a 4-hour program of my personal opinions.
Well,
not too positive.
It's clear that he's kind of written off California because we're such a Democratic state. We're not going to vote for him.
No.
So who do you represent? What about people who were insured by Allstate or some other insurance company? Who do you represent?
Sure. So here's what happens. many people in the area of the campfire had insurance. So that's one group of people. The people who have insurance, most of them are highly underinsured. And here's why. Even if they were insured to the full value of their home, most of which were not, the cost to rebuild are going to be significantly higher. Insurance companies usually do not pay or pay a very small amount for things like that spectacular tree in your yard. Replacing that tree can cost $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Your insurance will pay you $500. So our lawsuit helps insured people bridge the gap between their actual damages and what insurance covers. So that's what the lawsuit against PG&E is for. Now the insurance companies have a right to go back in against PG&E, and several of them have already filed a lawsuit saying they're entitled to be reimbursed for what they paid. But in our suit, we're looking to bridge that gap. Some people lost their pets. California, I hate to admit how attached I am to my 18-year-old Chihuahua. He's a family member, and California recognizes that and allows us to get not just, it'll cost you $1,000 to get a new Chihuahua. They actually allow you the emotional value of a loss of a pet. So those are things. And then, of course, there are those incredibly unfortunate family members who lost, a loved one or who have injuries as a result of the fire, who tried fighting it. So all of those things are the rationale for insured people to join the lawsuit because it bridges that gap for them. Then we have an enormous number of, and also, of course, sometimes the insurance company, knowing how destitute and desperate people are, tries to buy them out for a totally unfair amount. And that's acting in bad faith. And there are lawsuits that we can bring against insurance companies for essentially cheating their insured. It's called a bad faith claim. So that's separate and apart from the claim against PG&E. And that's for both insured and that's for just insured people. And lastly, there are cases for those uninsured people who either could not obtain insurance or couldn't afford it, and they're entitled to be reimbursed for the value of their properties as well from PG&E. So all of those things are what has led people to us, hopefully. We've gone and met a few times with some folks who've invited us to come out from the guild to speak with them. And, we're on the web. We just want to help folks, even though we know that because PG&E is in bankruptcy, the amount that people are going to get in that area is going to be dramatically less than they should be getting.
So then the suit that you filed is the people harmed by the campfire versus PG&E, or what is the suit? How does it name the plaintiffs?
Okay, each of them is named. Every person is named, and in that lawsuit, so all the plaintiffs' names are included, and in that lawsuit we've alleged negligence, which just is PG&E failing to act with due care when it has a duty of care. Inverse condemnation is a cause of action that says that you took over my property, and so I'm entitled to the value of what you took, and they did. And then California has protected us from power companies doing certain things, including causing fires, and so we've sued under those statutes as well. And I'd be glad to send you a copy of the lawsuit. We value our clients' privacy, so we're not going to use any of their names in a way that publicizes us. They are the people that matter.
So are these people that came to you, or are you listing everyone whose home was burned?
Oh, no, no, no. We represent a group of people, a fairly large group. There are lawyers and law firms who are out there signing up, everybody, and so different people will have different law firms. What normally happens is a decision will be made as to whether some of the law firms will want this to be filed as a class action. We would oppose that, and some people will call it a mass tort. The difference is, in a class action, all of the people of the class have a similar form of injury. In our case, it's very different. Some people have a house that was damaged. Some people have a house that's destroyed. Some people were injured. Some were killed. So it's our perception that a class action would be wrong for this lawsuit. It's really a mass tort. And that's what we'll be seeking. And then damages are looked at individually, not some group. Now, group and class actions can be very, very important. For example, if a pharmaceutical company, we're involved in class actions with Monsanto litigation, which we're heading, things like that. But we believe that this particular cause of action is better as a mass tort action, not a class action.
Got it. If you had a crystal ball, how would you predict that this will play out with the bankruptcy?
I have a very negative view of bankruptcy court because by the time the lawyers and the trustee and everyone gets done, there's rarely a huge amount left for the real victims. So, some of the concerns are the taxpayers or are the customers going to end up paying for their own damages essentially through increased rates and things like that, and one would have to concede that that's likely. PG&E does have insurance available to pay, but it's a very small comparatively policy. And so there's a question why they didn't get a bigger policy. But what bankruptcy does is slow it down and depreciate the amount that each victim will receive.
Is FEMA responsible for paying people damages who didn't have insurance?
FEMA has their own standards for evaluating it, and we have a lawyer with the firm who has worked with FEMA for years and was actually, before she became a lawyer 25 or 27 years ago, she was an adjuster. So she has been working with FEMA to try and navigate their rather difficult standards and help. Look, here's one of the other things that happens. When you have a fire, all of the documents that you ever had to prove a health condition, to prove ownership of things, it's gone. So insurance companies, some of the games that get played, and, with FEMA as well, we have to keep them following their own standards. So we're navigating that. Twice FEMA has created a cutoff, but then it's extended it. So hopefully people are getting some services. But we know, for example, that when the state and county set up shelters, they were not handicapped accessible. Well, there are a lot of retired military and other people that couldn't access the services that were made available.
Mm-hmm. So people who are listening, they should let people know about this suit, even if they have insurance, because they might be underinsured, or people who didn't have insurance. Who would you like to know about your services?
All of them. All of them. Anyone who had insurance may be having problems with them, or they won't be fully covered. Right now, because of the extent of the fires, building costs are up well beyond what anybody ever anticipated when they purchased their insurance. So we are glad to help anyone who's in need, and that includes renters. Renters lost a lot as well. So renters, property owners, if they need help, we're glad to be there for them.
And what's the best way for them to contact you?
Probably the easiest way is to go to our website, which is baumheadlandlaw.com.
And then does the firm take a percentage of the recovery fees, or how do you stay in business?
No, that's exactly what we do. We put up all of the costs for experts, for photographs, for everything that's needed. But in the end, those costs come back to us through our, through the client, and we take a percentage. And that percentage is 25%.
Was the car fire, what did you learn from the car fire in terms of how to get people the best return, and from the fire in the wine country? Have you learned from those recent fires?
Not really. Truthfully, many settlements are confidential. What I do know from all of the work that we've done and we do, the greatest example is we did the Amtrak crash, the train between New York and Philadelphia, when that crashed. And many of the lawyers just settled groups of clients for very low amounts. We actually sought hearings. We received some of the largest settlements because we're not about just settling out. We're about looking at each case, the value and the harm to each client. So that's what I can say. 41 years of negotiating as compared to looking at just fire cases.
Got it. Is there anything else that you would like listeners to know?
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Things will come back. You will come back. People have talked about, will we ever be able to return there? And the answer is the state and the county don't have enough money to buy out your land. So I think so. We certainly will do everything in our power to help make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. I really appreciate your sharing this information.
Thank you.